So I would like to say a formal welcome to everyone. I'm Dan Lambert, and I serve this congregation as minister. Our progressive, welcoming, inclusive, and judgment-free congregation is a liberal religious community of diverse and free-thinking individuals. UUFCC is a spiritual community where reason and social justice matter as people who learn, love, share, and serve together. We welcome all into our family. We begin our service each week by singing an invitation to gather together, even as we are scattered in many different places. So let's join in singing Enter, Rejoice, and Zoom in.
Enter, rejoice, and live. Enter, rejoice, and live. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and live. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and live.
You may have noticed that that's not the regular voices that we're used to hearing. And I would just like to let you know that during this month of September, our incredible music director, Jim Boyle, has the month off. And this was something that we planned in the budget so that we could bring in a variety of different voices and talents. And we have incredibly talented folks in our congregation who will be sharing music with us. That was Jerry and Alan Serrell joining, and so singing. They will be leading us in Enter, Rejoice, and Zoom in each Sunday during the month of September, and so I thank them for doing that. Our worship associate today is Sharon Whitehill, and she has an introduction for our chalice lighting. So Sharon, go ahead and share, please.
Good morning. I am Sharon Whitehill, and I am the worship associate this morning. After we recite the affirmation, I invite you all to light your chalices at home. We light this chalice, symbol of the light within us and around us. May this gathering for worship enlighten our hearts and our minds and our souls. And may the inner light of the Spirit be kindled by this time together. Amen.
Thank you, Sharon. And I invite you to recite this affirmation with me as we light our chalice. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our aspiration, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now I invite you to light your own chalice at home, and we'll give you just a moment to do that. Sharon has opening words to share with us at this time.
The opening words this morning are from Albert Einstein. The religious geniuses of all ages have been distinguished by the kind of religious feeling that knows no dogma and no God conceived in our human image. Hence, it is precisely among the heretics of every age that we find this highest kind of religious feeling. People who were, in many cases, regarded by their contemporaries as atheists, but sometimes also as saints. Looked at in this light, thinkers like Democritus, Francis of Assisi, and Spinoza are closely akin to one another.
Thank you, Sharon. And you may have heard her mention heresy. And our emphasis today is in fact on heresy, and we'll be talking about some incredible movements by UU heretics throughout the ages. And it's an opportunity for us to celebrate our heritage as heretics. So I'm super excited about that. I also would like to take a moment now to greet our visitors. If this is your, I'm sorry, if this is your first time with us, if you're a visitor, if you've been with us maybe a few times on and off over this pandemic on Zoom, or if you're joining us from the Unitarian Universalist Society of Syracuse, New York, we welcome you and we invite you to say hello to us. At the bottom of the Zoom window, there's a chat option. And if you are a visitor, we invite you to use chat to say hello. If you don't mind, you can share your name, where you're from, and maybe why you decided to join us or how you heard about us. And then we can have a chance to say hello back and welcome you to our service. So if you would like to do that at some point here in the next few minutes, we would really appreciate that so that we can acknowledge your presence with us. It's always great to have visitors. It does bring an energy even in a Zoom experience like this. So we're very, very glad to have you with us today as visitors. At this point in the service, we always have a hymn or a song that we share, and usually it's a hymn from our hymnal or maybe something from pop culture that has to do with our theme. As I said, our theme today is heretics, and there's a song that I've enjoyed for quite a while called One of Us. And it was recorded and made popular by Joan Osborne and then by Alanis Morissette. And our own Janice Fullman has recorded that. And I'd like for you to make sure that you pay attention to the words, because it's easy for non-theists to dismiss it as something that's just another Christian or theist song. And it's really not. It's a song that celebrates doubt, and a song that celebrates heresy in some ways, asking questions about if God exists, what if that God is not quite the way we think. So I invite you to sing along and read the lyrics as we enjoy Janice's version of One of Us.
If God had a name, what would it be? Would you call it to her face? You were faced with her in all her glory. What would you ask if you had just one question? Yeah, yeah, God is great. Yeah, yeah, God is good. Yeah, 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 yeah. What if God was one of us? Just as loud like one of us. Just a stranger on the bus, trying to make his way home. If God had a face, what would it look like? Would you want to see? If seeing meant that you had to believe in things like heaven and Jesus and the saints and all the prophets, and yeah, yeah, God is great. Yeah, yeah, God is good. Yeah, 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 yeah. What if God was one of us? Just as loud like one of us. Just a stranger on the bus, trying to make
thank you again to Janice for doing that. I know she had a friend also playing another guitar on that song. So we'll be sharing some different music through the month and enjoying the talent that we have in the congregation. And I'm very excited about that. One of the other things that if people have shared a lot of excitement about over the past few months is our new feature where we spotlight a member so that we can learn more about them and their background. And during the past few weeks, we've been spotlighting our worship associates. And so Sharon Whitehill, today's worship associate, is our member spotlight for today. So Sharon, go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us all about your entire life.
Hello again. Well, I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a very scary number of years ago. And I was born on my mother's own birthday. That's a double event that seems to have led to the theme of doubleness in my life. I have found doubleness everywhere. First of all, in my mother. She was a wonderful person, no one I'd rather spend time with, but she turned demonic at night when she drank. My father had a double self also. He was loving and generous and kind, but he had a volatile temper. My sister and I and our cousin often called him blower upper or bomb. Of course, my sister and I had our own alter egos. She divided herself into a sweetly compliant surface persona with a private one that she kept concealed. I have never been subtle. I was all on the surface. I was an A student that my teachers loved, and I was a blatant, outspoken rebel that my parents despaired of. I never put these ideas together until I was middle-aged, but now I can see it. Is it any wonder that my thesis topic in graduate school was the doppelganger, the double, in Charles Dickens' novels and in his own life? My mother also gave me a double gift. First was her love of language, literature and writing, speaking and reading. That naturally led me to my career as an English professor, where my second gift from my mother was the religious skepticism that I have carried with me all my life. And that has led me to you, my dear fellow and sister UUs. After high school in suburban Milwaukee came the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And there, true to form, I continued in my twin roles. I went on getting my A's, but I rebelled against the authority of dorm rules. This was the 1950s, and my father's warnings about behaving myself. 2 years of that, and I dropped out to marry a man everyone disapproved of, with whom I moved to West Michigan. There we had 3 little girls, and my youngest was only 4 months old when I went back to school, this time for good, all the way to a PhD. That was at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. My major was always English. My specialty was the Victorian period in England, and then came that dissertation on doubles in Charles Dickens. Back in Michigan after graduate school, I walked straight into my dream job, teaching English at Grand Valley State University near Grand Rapids. That was the very school where 3 years earlier I had earned my own Bachelor of Arts. So I went back there and I remained there for 32 years. This is still at a time when even a specialist in Victorian studies could also be a generalist. So I got to teach everything from Shakespeare to world mythology. Those are my 2 favorites always. From children's literature to modern poetry to creative writing. And I loved all of that. It was It was exactly where I belonged. I do admit that in the last of those 32 years, I did grow weary of departmental busy work, and especially grading papers. I have met no one on this earth who ever loved grading papers. My disaffection was, I was yearning to do my own writing, rather than read other people's writing. And writing is something that fills my life to this day. It's a special blessing during this pandemic, when sitting at the computer all day long is what I want to do anyway, whether or not I have other options. So it was with great joy that I retired in 2002. I was already a snowbird, attending UUFCC in the winters, and 10 or 15 years ago, we moved to Port Charlotte full time. I say we, in reference to my second husband, Jim Malloy, who is a former aircraft technician, and he later became a beekeeper. It seems he loves anything that flies. He's not a member of UUFCC, but then neither are the husbands of Ginger Abraham or Stephanie Garrett. So Jim is in good company with those fine fellows. He and I do teach our Happiness is an Inside Job classes together, generally after the first of the year at the fellowship. We don't know this year if we'll be able to, but we hope sometime in the future to resume those classes. One last thing, no more double life for me. I've finally outgrown living half of it as a rebel. Haven't I? You tell me.
Well, we need full disclosure here, Sharon, because each month when the worship associates meet and we talk about the upcoming services, people volunteer to say, I want to be worship associate at this service or that service. And as soon as I said we were going to do a service on heretics, Sharon jumped up and said, that's me, I want to do that service. So maybe not a double life, but definitely still the rebel, which is fantastic. It's one of the things we love about you. So thank you so much. It's great to learn more about your history. At this time, we move into the opportunity to share in our book of life, which of course, during this time on Zoom has become our chat room. If you have a concern or a joy or a situation or an illness or a wonderful celebration that you would like to share with us, we invite you to take this time to write about that in the chat room, our book of life during this pandemic on Zoom. We'll give you about a minute and a half or so. And in the past several weeks, we've been having an instrumental that Jim has written. During this month, we're going to share the talents of a couple of our other members. Today, we're going to hear Valerie Howitt play her harp, which is something we almost never get to do. And this is a tune called Carol Ann's Welcome. So while you're listening to this, we invite you to write in the chat room as our book of life to share what's going on in your life, either good or bad. That's so beautiful. Thank you to Valerie for sharing that with us. And I have to confess that I absolutely love harp music. It just makes me melt. So that means a lot. At this time, we'll move into a moment of silence, an opportunity that we have rarely taken advantage of during this time or really any other time of our life, just to sit in the quiet, to not talk, to not have noise or music or anything in our ears, but an opportunity to truly be silent, to share whatever burden is weighing on your shoulders, to lift up whatever joy or happiness that you have, to share positive energy with each other and with the universe. So we'll sit in silence for about 1 minute. And at the end of a minute, you'll hear a ding on the bell, and then we will share together as we sing Spirit of Life. So let's enter into a minute of silence at this time as we meditate. Beautiful. This is a great chance for us to hear some music from some of our other congregations. And so I really appreciate being so generous with what our other UU congregations have done and their willingness to share their talents with us. At this time, I'll just remind you that we are collecting our offerings still, our pledges and offerings for our various work and ministries that we still have going on. You can mail that into the office using the regular mail, and clearly we need to continue to support the post office during this time. But you can also have your bank automatically send checks, and we do collect electronically using Venmo as well. So regardless of how you give, please make sure that you put in the memo line or in the note exactly what your giving is for so that we can credit that appropriately. Thank you for your continued generosity during this time. We continue to have, obviously, bills and expenses to pay. So on we go. Let's talk about heretics some more, shall we? Well, most of you know that UUFCC has a pretty good presence on Facebook. We have an active Facebook page with lots of postings and people involved in different ways. Facebook also, many of you may not know this, allows people to leave reviews for businesses and for organizations. Well, 2 weeks ago, we received a new review on our Facebook page by a man named Eric Erdman. It was not a positive review either, even though he doesn't know us at all. See, Eric is a fundamentalist, a dispensationalist Christian. He posted that he did not recommend UUFCC, and he posted links to some of his videos so that we could tune in to his teachings, learn the truth about God and the truth about salvation. Very generous of him, right? Well, I replied, I admit, maybe in a bit of a snarky way, and said that we proudly accept his non-recommendation. This is true in the heretic spirit of Unitarian Universalism. Not only are UUs proud to be heretics, but the more people of other faiths criticize us for our beliefs and our non-beliefs, the more convinced we become that we have to be on the right track theologically to get such criticism. So what is a heretic anyway? And are UUs really heretics? That's the focus of today's sermon. Today, a heretic is anyone who does not conform to the established attitudes or doctrines or principles of a given religious faith. But that hasn't always been the definition of the word or the way that it's been used. In fact, the word heresy is a transliteration of an ancient Greek word that simply means able to choose. Able to choose. That doesn't sound so bad, does it? Well, if we go back to the first century, a time when Christianity was beginning, and we had the ministry of Jesus and so many of the writings and teachings that we have from the New Testament today, Gnosticism was a widely acknowledged heresy of that first century. And it dates all the way back to the beginnings of Christianity. Gnosticism comes itself from another Greek word and simply means having knowledge. Again, that doesn't sound like a terrible thing. Well, if you're a religious leader and you're trying to control people through that religion, allowing people to gain knowledge is a problem. Theologically, Gnosticism is a collection of religious ideas and systems which originated in the first century among early Christian and Jewish sects. These groups emphasized personal spiritual knowledge over orthodox teachings, traditions, or authority of the church, which sounds very much like a UU way of thinking, doesn't it? Most Gnostics viewed the spiritual realm, including our human spirits or souls or personalities or whatever you want to call it, as good, and anything material as flawed or evil, distinguishing between a supreme hidden God and a malevolent lesser divinity who was responsible for creating the material universe. Gnostics considered the principal element of salvation to be direct knowledge of the supreme divinity in the form of mystical or esoteric insight. Many Gnostic texts deal not in concepts of sin and repentance, but with illusion and enlightenment. In the Gnostic Christian tradition, Jesus is seen either as a divine being who took human form in order to lead humanity back to the light, or as a supremely enlightened man who gained knowledge of the ultimate God. Gnosticism was never a single standard system. There were lots of different forms of Gnosticism, and there still are in many ways. The early Christian church was officially unified in its own doctrine, beginning with what we call the Nicene Creed and the Council of Nicaea in the year 325. Here they talked about the nature of Christ, they talked about the Trinity, and the Roman Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea to try to codify some of these beliefs because there was such a variety of beliefs and what they called heresies at the time. So it became the formal and official form of Christian orthodoxy in the year 325. And of course, once you have orthodoxy or right belief, that necessarily means that anyone who disagrees with any aspect of that orthodoxy or has a divergent thought is, by our modern definition, a heretic. When the rule of the Roman Empire became intertwined with the rule of the Catholic Church, heresy couldn't be tolerated. Anyone who spoke against the official doctrines of the church had to be silenced by force or even by death, if necessary. Well, fast forward about 1400 years, and the Holy Roman Catholic Church still has primary power throughout most of the Western world, though their grip is slipping thanks to the growing Protestant movement started by Martin Luther in Germany. What both Catholics and Protestants shared in common at the time, though, was the doctrine of the Trinity and the doctrine of special salvation, the idea that some people went to heaven and some people went to hell, even though there were disagreements about how God decided who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. Well, it's into that morass that Universalism and Unitarianism was born, which is what we've talked about the past couple of weeks. And these were clearly seen as heretical theologies. We've talked a little bit about Francis David, our heretical patriarch from Transylvania, who denied the Trinity and said that God is one. We talked about Margaret Fuller, a famed feminist and abolitionist and transcendentalist who was a heretic. Theodore Parker, who rejected the authority of the Bible and of Jesus, who became a popular agitator for the abolition of slavery and for women's rights, and a political theorist who defined democracy as government of all the people, by all the people, for all the people, words that inspired President Abraham Lincoln. Parker was a heretic. John Hayes Holmes, a prominent Unitarian minister, pacifist, and co-founder of the NAACP and the ALCU, was a noted anti-war activist and was a heretic. Then there's John Murray, whose preaching led Orthodox Christians to accuse him of leading those who believed in universalism to a life of immorality. He was a heretic. Hosea Ballou, who rejected Calvinistic tenets, who introduced a Unitarian concept of God and reinterpreted the atonement, who said that the death of Jesus was simply a demonstration of God's infinite and unchangeable love for his children, who just put great stress on the use of reason in religion. He was a heretic. Many of those names may be familiar to you, but I also want to introduce you to a lesser known Universalist who was my favorite heretic of the 19th century, a man named Abner Nealon. Nealon was born in Gardner, Massachusetts in the late 1700s. As a young man, he became an evangelist and a theologian in the early 1800s who advocated views on women's rights, racial equality, and religious skepticism that were radical for his day. As a young man, Nealon was a lay preacher first in a Baptist church, but he converted to Universalism and was ordained in a Universalist church as a minister there. He served as minister for several years in different congregations, helping to organize new hymnals as they were printed, making his own translation of the New Testament, which was very common for the time. Lots and lots of ministers translated their own version of the New Testament from Greek as they learned it. Nealon disdained societal mores preferring naturalistic and personal quests for truth. He believed in equal treatment for all people, both under the law and as well in society. Neeland applied this even when religious scripture would seem to indicate differently. This included support for such controversial ideas as divorce rights for women, married women keeping their own names and their own property. His refusal to condemn interracial marriage. Neeland was also in favor of birth control in the early 1800s. He allowed fiery abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison the use of his lecture hall when the churches in Boston had turned him away. Neeland debated with other public theologians of the day, and as time went on, he became more and more skeptical of revealed religion, causing schisms in the churches that he led. Eventually, he and the Universalist Church in America parted ways after his views became too far removed from Orthodox Christianity. Neeland became a free thinker and a pantheist. Under the colonial charter of Massachusetts, which was over 200 years old at the time, blasphemy was still a crime in the 1800s, albeit one punished extremely rarely. However, perhaps because of his other views and he inflamed so much public angst, he was arrested and tried for the crime of heresy. His trial was held in 1838. Neeland was convicted and served 60 days in prison, becoming the last person in America ever arrested or tried for heresy. He was described by the judge in the trial as a cantankerous and inflexible heretic, a moniker that we could apply to many of our own members here at UUFCC, and in fact, many Unitarian Universalists throughout the world, and perhaps proudly so. Neeland left Massachusetts after he was released from jail, moved to Iowa, where he started a small utopian community named Celebria. And it didn't last very long. He died in 1844. That community shut down, and that community today is known as Farmington, Iowa. I could go on and on, honestly, listing notable heretics in UU history. But I also want to share a little bit about my own heretical history, because it exists, which is why I'm here today. Those of you who know my history know that I didn't grow up in a religious family. My parents never went to church. I never went to church with them. I visited church sometimes with my grandmother, or if friends invited me to go to pizza night at youth group. Or once I went to a hockey game for free, because it was free. I did, though, become a Christian at the age of 19 when I was a freshman in college, believing that it would help me lead a straighter, more perfect life and help me meet my personal and career goals. I felt a call and responded to a call to become a youth pastor and went to a Bible college where I finished my college degree. And I remember one day going into the elevator as I was heading up to class. There was some discussion about that. And somebody said, you know, I don't know if there's room in this elevator. I doubt that I can fit. And I said, you know, I doubt things all the time. And someone else said, well, you shouldn't doubt your faith. And I said, oh no, I doubt my faith too. And I got darts shot at me through everybody's eyes, because doubt about the Christian faith in that particular setting was something that was not allowed. In 1993, I was a youth pastor at a Reformed church in Jenison, Michigan, which happens to be right by Grand Valley State that Sharon was talking about. I refused to have my son baptized as an infant when he was born, and our new senior pastor, who was very much a part of the Reformed religious tradition, didn't like the fact that I wasn't going to have him baptized and fired me for that heretical theology. Seminary was another opportunity for me to learn from new professors. I went to seminary in Cincinnati, where I often asked questions and challenged my professors both in and out of class, but I was told very quickly by the older students that that was wrong, that I should never doubt what the professors say, that I should never question the theology that they raise. And I had a discussion one day with a preaching professor who said that youth pastors weren't qualified to preach or to fill the pulpit. And I quickly told him how much I disagreed with that, and that God's call to ministry was for everyone to serve in various roles. Again, I was called a heretic. I served for several years as a youth ministry professor and then as a dean. I taught theology and Bible at a school called John Brown University in Arkansas, a very good but conservative Christian university in the northwest corner of the state. As my theology continued to develop, my view of what's called infallibility was changing. Infallibility is the idea that the Bible as the Word of God does not contain any errors. And there's a couple different views on this. Some people believe, if you're a fundamentalist, that the Bible is not wrong about anything, even what it says about science. These are the folks who believe in young Earth, six-day creation. They believe that Noah's magic boat was real and the worldwide flood was a thing. And I was having doubts about that. I was writing a blog at the time, and I asked questions rather than making statements. And I asked a question about infallibility, and I had several hundred readers of my blog, and I had some other fellow Bible professors who got wind of this. I was called into the university president's office, where I was made to defend my view of infallibility, and it put me on the radar. Later, I was teaching a class for seniors called Atheism, Skepticism, and Doubt, where I used primary text written by atheists who were former Christians, and that was just about as much as the president could take. Retired faculty, financial backers of the school, parents of students hated that class. They were uncomfortable with what I was doing. Students, however, loved the class, as college students often do with something that seems to be anti-authoritarian. Eventually, I got fired from that position as well. Today, I would describe my faith and the way that it's developed over my adult lifetime as more mystical, influenced by pagan ideas, by earth religions, humanists, certainly, with a healthy dose, though, still, of the teachings of Jesus, which I believe are incredibly insightful and incredibly valid. In fact, I still believe I could spend a lifetime studying the Sermon on the Mount and never have to study another book about how to treat human beings and the work of whatever God exists in the world today. I am a true heretic, and most of my former professors and friends and many family members call me a heretic and have disassociated themselves from me because of that. And so I fit right in here at UFCC. I fit right in as a Unitarian Universalist minister. In fact, as I was preparing the sermon this week, it made me think that maybe we should change the name of our fellowship from the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Charlotte County, which is an awful lot of syllables and really difficult from a marketing standpoint, to simply the Fellowship of Heretics. It has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? And it would attract the kind of people who are part of our tribe. We would still call ourselves a Unitarian Universalist congregation, however, because that's who we are. But imagine the marketing possibilities that come with a name like the Fellowship of Heretics. We could adjust what we call some of our activities. Imagine changing the name of Conversation Among Friends to Conversation Among Heretics. Instead of worship hour, we could have heresy hour. Maybe our religious education efforts become heresy education. Parents would love that, right? See the possibilities? Our logo could be people burned at the stake, or maybe a bloody guillotine. All right, maybe that's too far. Regardless, heresy is in our Unitarian Universalist DNA. Heresy became a dirty word centuries ago, which is too bad, honestly. It's too bad because of all the ways of thinking, of all the belief systems and all the theologies and philosophies and worldviews. They all need to be challenged in order to stay fresh and to have checks and balances, no matter how correct they may be. Even Unitarian Universalism needs theological checks and balances. Remember early in the sermon, I pointed out that heresy is a transliteration of an ancient Greek word that simply means able to choose. The ability to choose your beliefs, to evaluate the truth claims of other people or groups or religions, that ability is part of what makes us free-thinking humans. How boring and terrible it would be if we all ignored or agreed on everything, which is never a problem for UUs. Sometimes we have a problem agreeing on anything. But I also must point out that the ability to choose means nothing without studying and evaluating those choices. One who presumes to be a free thinker but does not study a variety of thoughts is simply a fool who may think he's a very stable genius. So, my fellow UU heretics, exercise your ability to choose. Choose to be a heretic if the shoe fits. Our fourth principle dedicates us to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That search also requires us to be responsible as we take an effort to search for that truth and for that meaning. I'll leave you with this one final thought. To be a good heretic, you can be a free thinker, but you cannot be a non-thinker. Amen and blessed be. Sharon has our closing words.
Closing words are from Robert Ingersoll on heresy. Am I unmuted?
You're good.
Yes, you're fine.
Okay. Heresy is the eternal dawn, the morning star, the glittering herald of the day. Heresy is the last and best thought, the unknown sea toward which the brave all sail, toward the eternal horizon of progress. Heresy extends the hospitalities of the brain to that which is new. Heresy is a cradle, orthodoxy, a coffin.
Thank you, Sharon. Those are really strong closing words that are a perfect fit for our service. And now we extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope, the fire of commitment, or the warmth of community. May those ideals shine in our lives and warm our hearts until we are together again. Just a few more words as we prepare to close the service. Zoom has changed or is changing their security requirements. So you probably noticed that for most of you, you had to come in through what we call a waiting room and allowed to get permission to come into the service. As UUs, we don't like to have to get permission to do things like that. But not only is that true for our Sunday morning service, but in a couple more weeks, that's going to be true for all of our meetings as well. And so we're kind of slowly rolling out this security feature so that when it becomes required by Zoom, we'll be used to the fact that all of the meetings we have, our committee meetings, our conversation among friends, our Spanish class, the meditation group, all of that will have the same type of security feature that for the most part will have a link with an embedded password that you can use. But sometimes you may enter a room that has a waiting room like this, and the host will have to allow you to enter. So please bear with us as we figure out some of those changes. It also allows us to advertise the link for our services and our activities more widely, whereas before we were concerned about being Zoom bombed, which was a thing where people not part of us would come in and share profanity and pornography and create all kinds of problems. Fortunately, we haven't had a problem with that. But now we can share our Zoom link on Facebook and in the newspaper and on our website, and people can join us, and instead of causing problems, they get into a waiting room where we can evaluate, I guess, a little bit of who they are and ask some information. And it reduces the chance of us being Zoom bombed and having a negative experience. The good news there is that you get to continue to invite friends. Share our Zoom link and our information with your friends, your family, put it on your own Facebook page or social media or whatever you have. We love to have visitors. And during this time when we're live via Zoom, finding a way to have visitors safely join us is fantastic. So we're very glad to be able to do that. Just a reminder, after our benediction, we invite you to stay around for social hour, and we end our services each week by singing together, Go Now in Peace. So let's join together as we sing Go Now in Peace. Again, a recording from another congregation.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
At the end of the service, as I do each week, I encourage you to be a blessing to everyone that you meet as you're out and about. During these days, we all need to share positive words and encouragement. When you go to the grocery store, please share a special word of encouragement to those who are checking out the groceries, to those who are bagging the groceries. If you go to a restaurant, please make sure you say thank you to the servers and to the managers for being open and for being safe and for wearing masks and for trying to make things as normal as possible. For those that you live with, be a blessing to them, because during this time, the people we live with may be the only folks that we ever really see or have conversations with. And most importantly, be a blessing to yourself. Give yourself a break, be good to yourself, do self-care, do the things that you know bring you positive energy. But in all things, be a blessing to everyone that you meet. Thank you all so much for being here. To our friends from Syracuse, New York, from the Union Society of Syracuse, we really say thank you. It was great to have you with us. We invite you to stick around and be part of our social hour. So now we'll open up time for sharing for social hour and say thank you again to everyone for being here. Bye-bye.
Great service, Jan.
Thank you.
Yes, very.
I love the harp music.